So this is class 41 of faith and confidence, which is like Torah coaching. So we saw that it's not just about accepting the negative, it's about accepting the negative with joy.
That's the verb dynamics.
Right. That was what we saw last time. That what does it mean to accept it with joy? So we said that in order to be able to move from faith into confidence, so there has to be not just an acceptance of what's happening, but also to accept it with gratitude, with joy. Gratitude is the final expression of joy. If a person can express his or her joy, it comes out as gratitude. But to do that, so we brought the story with Rabbi Akiva, and that even though everything had gone wrong, so he says everything that God does is for the good, it's for the best. So that's a form of expressing his gratitude. He's not just suspending his judgment and saying, I don't know how this is going to turn out. He's also saying this is for the best. And that itself, that ability to express my gratitude, it itself changes the reality. That's what I can do at that time. So on the one hand, it's a state of faith because I have nothing to do. I don't even know what needs to happen. But I accept that what is happening is for the best. And we said that this is being made into a big deal in the past 10 years, say, or so, that people have begun to understand that if you're able to muster enough strength, not just to suspend judgment about what's happening to you and not to see it as negative, but also to thank Hashem for what's happening to you, so it actually changes reality. And that's a big secret about reality that comes out of this story from Rabbi Akiva that we learned. So let's read from 531. Rabbi Akiva does not understand the manner in which God's providence works, but believes with complete and perfect faith that the Almighty meant well and awaits God's salvation from afar, meaning from his state of self-nullification. Afar symbolizes wisdom. Wisdom is a state of self-nullification. When you're afar, it's a sort of disengagement from reality. You're looking at it from afar. That's what it sounds like. But really, it's a state of nullification. And the example of somebody standing from afar and being related to wisdom is Miriam, which we read about in last week's Parsha, about which it says, and his sister Miriam stood from afar, awaiting to see how God would save her baby brother Moses, placed in the small weed basket on the Nile. And the wisdom is referred to as one sister. In the verse, say to wisdom, you are my sister. It's a verse from Proverbs. Wisdom that emanates from the Almighty is said to appear from afar. From afar Havaya appeared to me. So that's what comes down. It's this wisdom that is able to connect a person with faith in such a way that we said that it leads to his trust in Hashem, not just to his faith. That's the big change. That usually when we say self-nullification, we're just connecting it to faith. We're just saying that the person is standing by, waiting for Hashem to do what he does. I have no idea what needs to happen. That's what self-nullification is like. I don't know what needs to happen. But it's not even passive confidence. It's just faith. The only issue is that self-nullification is supposed to lead to a state of action. This is what we learned. If you remember, we learned this when we were learning rectifying the ego. That self-nullification, bittul, is about feeling that I'm Hashem's emissary. That's really what it's about. And Moshe Rabbeinu was very good at it, but his nullification was the type that I have no connection to this world. I'm here only because Hashem sent me, but I have no connection here. So this, what Hashem was trying to do to him, God was trying to elevate him to a state, or to connect him more to this world, to a state of nullification that says, I'm here to do some mission. Right? Moses doesn't want to take on the mission that God gives him. He's not interested. Why is he not interested? Because he doesn't understand how this world works. So so we're a lot of times faced with something like that. That we need to enter into a part of reality, into part of our lives, and part of the world, where we have no devices. We don't know what we're doing. It's like we say to Hashem, Hashem, my neshama didn't come down here for this. I don't know what you're sending me into. Why do you suddenly want me to do this? So, what do we do to somebody who's in that state? We have to give him a new mission, a new name. In fact, if you think about it, maybe Moshe in English is from the word, maybe the word mission is from the word Moshe. That he had to have a new name. His letters also mean, the letters of his name from you to say the name, Hashem.
But didn't Abraham do that already?
Right, and when Abraham had finished his mission, as it were, and he had no children, he had done his mission. What was his mission? His mission was to teach the nations of the world about monotheism. To teach them there's only Hashem. Thank you. And he did a very good job. But Avram wants more. He says, I want to create a people that will change the world. Not just what I taught, but they will change what. So Hashem says, for that I need to give you a new name. The old name that you had, that doesn't include this mission. So he changed his name. Avram eno molid, Avraham molid. So he changed him from Avram to Avraham. That hey, that additional hey, was what changed everything.
And that was his.
And that changed his ability. So by Moshe, there's the same thing.
He took his shoes off?
That we said when he took his shoes off, Hashem was preparing him to put on new shoes. Not that he didn't take the shoes off just to take them off. He took them off to put on a new pair. And the shoes, in this sense, they represent the person's connection with the world. We talked about that 2 times ago. Or maybe last time, 2 times ago. And now when he comes down again, it's with a new sense of having a purpose of what he needs to do. And we said that in his name, that's the shin in his name. Before then he was just ma. Ma is the sense of nullification. And the shin is this yesh, is this feeling of being connected to the world. So for instance, this is where the custom comes from, that if somebody's very ill, and it seems that they're not going to make it, so we add a name. Why do we add a name? Because the name is the mission. So Miriam also, she's waiting to see what will happen with what she prophesied. So she enters into a state of being afar. She stood from afar, which is to connect with this nullification before God. And then indeed what happens is that the daughter of God, as it were, Vatya, she comes down and she saves Moshe. And suddenly he has a whole new life in front of him. So that's the state that Rabbi Akiva was in his test. But then, the state of, now he writes, however, the state of confidence and trust in God that is above Rabbi Akiva's state of belief was exhibited by his own teacher, Nachum of Gamzu. And the Talmud relates, and why did they call him Nachum of Gamzu? The reason is that with regard to any matter that occurred to him, he would say, this too is for the good. How is this different than what Rabbi Akiva said? First of all, Rabbi Akiva said it in Aramaic. And Aramaic is considered to be the backside of Hebrew. Backside meaning that there's not full awareness there. You can't be 100% conscious in Aramaic. It's called, Reb Nachman writes, Targum is Tardema. That the Aramaic is called the language of translation. So some people just call it Targum. Targum, which means translation. It's like today's translation would be Yiddish. The language of translation today would be Yiddish. So what does it mean that it's not fully conscious? It means that it goes into the psyche, deep into the psyche, to uncover things that you can't say openly.
What Aramaic does?
Aramaic was in their time, and in our time it's like Yiddish.
Deeper than Hebrew?
Yeah, Hebrew is like the revealed. It's a language of revelation. But there's always, together with Hebrew, there's always another language lingering in the background that Jews use. And when they're using it, so they're basically speaking their unconscious. That's what it's viewed as. That's what it means that it's the backside.
And
So-
he said that everything.
So
Hashem
he
does-
said it in Aramaic. He said everything that the lover, he doesn't even say Hashem. Kol ma David Rachmana, the lover, because it's almost like even in the psyche you can't say Hashem openly. When you're aware, when you're conscious, you say Hashem. When you're in your subconscious, what you feel is that Hashem loves you. That's the subconscious. So here, there you call it. So in Aramaic, Hashem is called Rahmana, the lover. So everything that He does for good, not for the best, but for good. L'tavavi. And then Nachum Ishgamzu, though, he speaks in conscious Hebrew. It's conscious in his mind. So he says, Gamzu l'tova, and it's not just that it's conscious. It's also that it's good now. By Rabbi Akiva, it's letavavid. He does it for the good. By him, it's gamzu letova. This itself is for the good. You can see it. It's here. You can point at it. Zu means this. But you hear in Rabbi Akiva's kol ma de avid rachmana. Ma, again, in Aramaic, it's a little bit different than the Hebrew, but it captures the same sense. It's a sense of nullification. So by Nachum Ishgamzu, who was Rabbi Akiva's one of his teachers, so he says he's faced with a difficult situation and he trusts and he knows and he has a picture of what needs to happen. So he's in very, very passive confidence. He has a complete picture of what needs to happen. So let's read the story. Everybody knows the story, don't read it anyway. Once the Jews wished to send a gift to the house of the emperor in Rome. They said, who should go and present this gift? Let Nachum of Gamzu go, as he is accustomed to miracles. They sent him with a chest full of jewels and pearls, and he went and spent the night in a certain inn. During the night, the residents of the inn arose and took all the precious jewels and pearls from the chest and filled it with earth, dust. The next day, when he saw what had happened, Nachum Ishgamzu said, this too is for the good. Meaning here, there's a mistake. I copied from Sefaria. Whoever translated made a mistake. The next day he went to the emperor. The correct translation should be, the next day he went to the emperor, and when he arrived there at the emperor's palace, they opened the chest and saw that it was filled with earth. And the king wished to put all the Jewish emissaries to death. He said, the Jews are mocking me. And then Nachum Ishgamzu said this was the first time he saw that there was earth in there. The translation here is incorrect. So he saw that there was earth there, and he says, Gamzu l'tova, this too is for the good. So Elijah the prophet came and appeared before the ruler as one of his ministers. Really what it means is that one of the ministers suddenly had an idea. Avraka. Suddenly he had this insight.
Maybe he came. He comes. Oh yeah.
It needs somebody else to do it for him. So he came and appeared before the will as one of the ministers, and this minister says to the, or this guard, whoever it is, says to the ruler, perhaps this earth is from the earth of their father Abraham. As when he threw earth into it turned into swords, and when he threw stubble it turned into arrows. As it is written, his sword makes them as the dust, his bow is the driven stubble. So that's what he said, and that's exactly what happened. So he sent this dust somewhere, and this emperor sent it wherever, and indeed it turned into what do you call them? No. What do you call these things?
Arrows, right?
Yeah, that makes it sort of archaic. It turned it into those missiles that. But the cruise missiles. It turned into cruise missiles.
It was the War of the Four Kings and the Five Kings.
That was when Abraham.
Right, that was that's when he had the earth coming arrows.
So all that came from Abraham's shiftless, from his lowliness. That he said, I am like dust and ashes. So the dust was from his war with the four kings. It was almost impossible that he could win such a war. But because of it, but shiftless, again, we said many times, lowliness is not a sense of being nothing. It's a sense of being something, the most something that there is, but it's a rectified something. So there's something, I know what all my drawbacks are. I know what all my problems are. And that's very related to bitachon. Bitachon is the same idea in the sense that it also works on my yesh, works on my feeling of being. But now we added, how is this different than regular bitachon? How is this different? What is Moshe's new level of bitachon? How is it? Is it like Nachum Ish Gamzu, or is it like Rabbi Akiva? So I said, no, it's like Nachum Ish Gamzu, that he can create a miracle. He can bring something down. So later, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he comes to before Paro, so he does all the miracles, and then and Hashem says, I already gave them to you. You have them in your being already, these miracles, and including the fact that this we saw many years ago, if you remember, that Hashem didn't tell him that there would be meat. He only told him there would be bread. He only told him about the manna. And Moshe Rabbeinu, he added from himself that there will also be in the evenings meat. And that there was no promise from Hashem. Hashem never mentioned that. He added that, and that's exactly what happened. So that's bitachon, because bitachon says I can create a new reality. That's what it means to have a miracle.
What did he add? I missed
When Moshe Rabbeinu, when people came to him and said, we're starving, we have nothing to eat. So Hashem told him, he gave him a spoiler. He said, I'm going to bring down lechem min hashamayim. I'm going to bring down bread from heavens every morning. He didn't say a word about meat. And Moshe Rabbeinu added, there's also going to be meat in the evening. How can he make such a promise? He makes it because he has such a level of bitachon that he can create a reality, just like Nachum Ish Gamzu did here.
Miriam.
And like Miriam did. So this is, we talked about this, it's a feeling of inevitability. It can't be otherwise. It becomes inevitable. It's not even a feeling of maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Like there's an option now. Real bitachon in this sense is the feeling that it is inevitable. Now we'll talk about this today. We'll try to apply it to something in our lives that's always in front of us. Especially for young people. It's always in front of them. Okay? So let's read a little bit more in Hebrew. Nimtzenu lemedim. So I'll read it in English. I don't think I translated this yet. So what we learn from all of this,
What page are you on?
on page 69,
How many lines down?
it's the second paragraph. So all this was about what leadership is about in Yiddishkeit. It's this type of bitachon that things are inevitably going to be good. There's no other option. Of course, what happens? That I talked about this many times. When a person goes to a tzaddik, why does he go to a tzaddik? Because tzaddik is, his purpose, his meaning in life is that here's somebody who has bitachon. I wonder if somebody could turn the light on.
Isn't
Could you
it
turn-
on? They're both
No,
on.
no. The middle one is not on. Thank you. Oh.
Then-
So, when you go to a tzaddik, what are you looking for? You're looking for tzaddik gozel v'akadosh baruch hu mekayim. You're looking for the tzaddik making a decree, and Hashem follows the decree. That's exactly like Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, there's going to be meat in the evenings. That's exactly like Nachum saying, this dust is fine, no problems. It's worth it, trust me. That's the level of confidence that the person's looking for. Because let's say somebody suddenly has bad news, and he's ill, or something like, whatever it is. So why do people go to a tzaddik? Because they want to be reassured that everything will be okay. Why? Because it's very hard for them to trust it themselves. But it's a known fact, that if a person has tremendous trust that everything will be okay, that's what the Rebbe kept saying to people. Even if you don't know how it's going to be okay, you don't have a plan, but you can see what it means to be okay. You understand what that means. That you mean. You don't know how to get from point A to point B. It's not active confidence, but you have a picture of what the end result needs to be. So you want to get from a tzaddik, you want to get the reassurance, the confidence that this is indeed what's going to happen. And that's what the tzaddik has to work on. So remember, we talked about this when we talked about therapy, that if you can't see the person in front of you coming out in a good state, don't treat them. You're the tzaddik in this case. What can you do? That's how Hashem runs the world. That you became the person who's supposed to give this feeling of confidence to the patient. That's your duty. The Rebbe was always angry at doctors who would come and say, you have no chances. Why? Who gave you the permission? The only permission you have is to heal. And that's the only picture you need to paint. The doctor says, but it's not ethical not to put the statistics in front of the patient. Why? If the point of medicine is to give information, we don't need doctors. There's Medline. You can research it yourself. You can see what the statistics are and go home. Why do I need the doctor? The doctor's purpose is not to tell me what the statistics are. That's not the point. Medicine is not about telling me about statistics. It's not about information. It's about healing. And it's known. Everybody knows this. It's not like the statistics on this are overwhelming. That when a person is positive and they have confidence that they'll be okay, and not only that, but they even have gratitude. They go home and they have gratitude to Hashem. Thank you for giving me this. Why? Because I know this is good. And it's giving me this, and it's giving me that. And all this is good. It's passing. And I appreciate the time now that I have to deal with this, because it allows me to do things I didn't do until now. And people who come from that approach, the odds are overwhelmingly in their favor. And suddenly, from maybe 50-50, it turns into 90-10. Or some people would say it's 100%. And then once in a while, it doesn't work out the way that people thought. And so, who do people blame? And that's what the doctors are afraid of. That you put false hope in their hope is never false. What do you think it would have, if you tell the person you don't need to do anything at all? So a doctor probably shouldn't say that. It's not he can, but the doctor, that's not his business. His business is to heal. So he can't say you don't need to do anything. That would be improper for a doctor. So he says that there are certain things you have to do. But it doesn't matter what I think the chances are. The moment that you'll do them, because you in your mind have 100% healing rate, so that's it, it's over. You don't have to do all it. But the tzaddik, he's the one who has to bear the grunt of the responsibility. and convince the person that everything will be okay. Why? Because otherwise, if they're not going to come with that attitude, then it's not so clear that everything will be okay. You need that attitude in order to succeed. That's what you're fighting, really. It's not even the physical illness. The physical illness is just a symptom of the real fight, which is that my health is inevitable. That's all there is in the world. There's nothing else. And then something happens, and somebody loses. So who's blamed? So the doctor, Baruch Hashem, he said to do all kinds of treatments, so he's off the hook. But then they come to the tzaddik, and the tzaddik is a liar. The tzaddik's not a liar. That's not his job. His job is not to lie. His job is to strengthen a person's confidence. The person wasn't able to pull through for whatever reason, doesn't matter. That's not his fault. He did what he's supposed to do. On the contrary, if he doesn't do that, then he's not doing his job. If you don't want to hear to be confident, don't go to a tzaddik. Stay at home and stay in your own state of mind. But a real tzaddik, that's what he does. So let's apply this a little bit further. And to understand this, we need one more line here. And the line here says in Hebrew that faith is about what's called the higher unification, and confidence is about the lower unification. Okay, so now this requires a little bit of background, 5 minutes on this. That in God's name, the first two letters, Yud and Hey, are constantly unified. They are always in unification. Chochmah and Bina, wisdom and understanding, father and mother, all these are different names for the same thing, the Yud and the Hey, which are always connected. How do we see that they're always connected? It's a holy name in and of itself, Yud Kei. The two final letters, Vav and Hey, says the Arizal, they're not always connected. They connect through our actions. They experience a unification, a zivug or a yichud, okay. What can we do with this? We say that the higher unification, like the mother and the father, is the unification that always exists, even when we're in exile. Even when you're in a state in which you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. That you feel that Hashem is hidden from you. So there's still always the higher unification. And that's what faith is. The faith is, on the contrary, even the darker it gets, the more faith there is. That's how faith works. But confidence is more like the lower unification, and it depends on your ability to act. So actually, the more you act, the more confidence you build. So in a state of where you're allowed to act, where you're given permission to act, you're not in exile, you're not in darkness, you're in light, and you have a chance to do, so that's where confidence comes in, and it actually strengthens the more that you do.
So when you talk about acting, is that maaseh, at the level of mamish action,
Okay.
or is it thought, speech and action? At what level of the garments? Does it matter? Is it in thought? Is it mamash?
In Kabbalah, I'll explain in a moment what it is, but for us, it's whatever I can do, whatever I need to do to pursue my goals. In Kabbalah, it's Torah and mitzvahs. We'll see in a second.
No, but in the context that you're talking in, someone's challenged by feeling distance from Hashem.
Okay.
And okay, so we're having the higher, but at the lower yichud, it's requiring action
Mm-hmm.
because you're in a state of darkness and distance. And that I'm saying in that context, is that the action that is required to reconnect or experience that as a physical action?
It's very hard to connect yourself. If you're in darkness,
Yeah,
You
that's
said-
what I'm asking. What is, you're saying it's the action that requires you to connect to the confidence. What do you mean by action?
one of the things that is the hardest to cope with in life is that we don't have control over our circumstances. So sometimes we're in darkness and sometimes we're in light. The quality of a good life depends on whether a person is aware of where he is and acts in the way that can be and takes it the way it should be taken. Meaning, I don't know why there's periods of darkness and periods of light. That I don't know. But if it's a period of darkness, I have to work on my faith. Meaning, to try and do then is to miss the point.
So it's working on the high, being conscious of the higher you.
At that time, what you become more conscious of is the Hara Yichud, the Yud Kei.
Just, and it's actually, there's no working, there's no action. It's
Right.
just a existential awareness. Okay. I think
That's the hardest part, because the person always wants to feel in control. But there are times when you're not in control. So what is demanded from you? Faith. We just read on a group of counselors and therapists. They had this meme about negative type of reinforcement. Negative type of reinforcement is saying to somebody, you can always control your situation. You're right. You can't always control it. But don't put a person in a position where he can never control it. So there's good days and bad days. I don't know why. Nobody knows why. It's not like if you'll do this or you'll do that. There was once a young man that came to me, and he wanted me to help him get out of his depression. So I said to him, you'll get out of your depression anyway.
They won't if you have a bad attitude.
I said, what's the good attitude? The good attitude is that maybe I can't change it. But there's many other things that I can do in the meantime. I shouldn't give up on what I can do. There are other things, the depression I have no control over. It's not like, it's like a person having a flu. So, God willing that all depressions should pass like the flu after 7 days. But since Baruch Hashem depression is not that common, flu is more common, so it's a good example of the flu. You can't decide that you're healthy. It's just not going to work. You have to take the time off. Okay, so that you take time. You do what you can do during that time. You pass the time however you can. It'll pass, because apparently what Hashem wants from you, what is wanted from you during that time is faith. That's all. The faith itself is something. Don't think that it's nothing. It's also something you need to develop. But there's also times where there is something that you can do. And so at that time, it depends. You can have a picture of what needs to happen, and then it's just passive confidence. You can have an actual plan. There'll be active confidence. But there you're required to do something. So flu is not the best example, because the flu, and even in depression, there is something that you can do. There is something that you can do all the time. And that nobody took away from you. And that is to use your imagination to envision what it will look like when you're finished with it.
But that's positive. That's what I'm trying to say. Some people are so black.
Right. So I said, don't take away that from the person. It's true. They don't have control about when it's going to end. But what they can do in the meantime is to continue to envision and not to give up on what it will look like when you are finished with it. And you will be finished with it at some point. It's going to pass at some point. You're not going to stay with it forever. That has to be like the grounding principle. These things don't last forever. So can you have a vision of what will be when I'm finished? What does it look like? And I said, the more you have that vision, it'll probably be a shorter time before it happens. But it's not in your control. It's not up to you. Okay. So what is not, so when it comes to every person, especially young people, when they have to get married, so they have to exercise confidence, not faith. That's the big difference. That before I was married, so I live off of faith. Who do I have faith in? My parents. My parents give me faith. But when you become an adult, and especially when you get married, now you have to have confidence. Okay? So now let's put this in perspective. How does this work? As I said, we'd explain it in terms of the actions. In Kabbalah, in the way it was explained in Chassidus, the higher unification has two names. It's either called kissing or embracing. It's either neshikin or chibuk. So you're either it's in the mouth or it's in the hands. It's an embrace. That's the higher unification. That's how it works between the mother and the father. In me, my wisdom and my understanding. The lower unification has a completely different name. And this is the name that you hear most in Chassidus. In fact, in Chassidus almost nobody talks about the embrace and the kissing. It's almost never mentioned. It's considered to be more intimate. But actually the lower one is even more intimate, but that's what's repeated in Chassidus all the time. It's called dveikut, to cling. And where did that come from? It comes from when God says, and therefore a man shall leave his mother and father, faith, and cling to his wife. And that's the lower unification, to cling, dveikut. Okay, so in the Tanya he explains what these three are. What is nishikin? What does it mean to kiss? What does it mean to have a relationship with kissing? He says that's learning Torah. That comes from the mouth. What about chibuk, embrace? Those are the mitzvos. But the mitzvos are like a makif. It's like Hashem embracing me, or I'm embracing Hashem. That's the image that he gives in the Tanya many times. That the mitzvos are like holding the king by grabbing his garments. So I'm embracing him. When I'm speaking, it's like he and I are like kissing. When I speak Torah, when I learn Torah, it's like kissing Hashem. So where is the clinging? The clinging is prayer. Dveikut is really prayer. That's the image in Chassidus. That's why when Chassidus talks so much about clinging to Hashem, what it really means is it's a state of being in prayer. It's like David HaMelech, V'ani tefillah, that everything I am is prayer. So you can think maybe prayer is something passive. No, it's very, very active.
It's more malchut.
Okay? That's why it's the Vavke. It's the whole Vavke is to raise the Malchus, is to raise reality. That's what confidence is meant to do. Faith doesn't change reality; it just allows me to sustain it. Reality doesn't. If I come to a place where I'm at the dead end, I have to go back to the fact there's only Hashem and everything's fine, but I can't affect it. I'm not a party to what's going on here. But confidence is the feeling that I can raise reality. I can lift it. I can elevate it. And that power of elevation is through prayer. That's dveikut. That's what dveikut. It's an amazing thing that you read so much Chassidus. It says dveikut everywhere. Not so much in Chabad. Chabad doesn't talk so much about dveikut. But in the Polish Chassidus and in the Hungarian and everywhere else, the most important word is dveikus. And literally it means the lower unification, which is prayer. it's more intimate than kissing and embracing. Because it's clinging, it's already to do what? It says very simply that from kissing and from embracing, no children are born.
Right.
But clinging, which is the procreative act itself, so you have to ask, how can you procreate? It's almost, when you daven, that's what you're doing.
Wow.
When you're praying, that's why before we start praying, that's when we say, the Shem Yichud. In Chabad, you only say it then, you don't say it any other time. By Kabbalah, you can say it before every mitzvah. Because every mitzvah has a quality of changing reality in it. But by Chabad, it's only said before praying, one time a day. Because that's the ikr. The ikr is during the prayer, and the prayer is like an act of procreation. You're creating something new in the world.
It has to be the formal prayers.
Obviously, it's first of all related to the formal prayers, but then it can be any prayer that a person has. So, like by Breslov, they so much love this that should be in Dveikus all the time. What does it mean Dveikus? That's Isbodidus. It's being with Hashem alone. You go out into the field. Why do you go out in the field? Because it's not sneistic to do it in front of people. Some people do it anyway in front of people. But if you have a sense for what's going on, it's a little disturbing to somebody who sees somebody in the middle of Isbodidus with Hashem doing it in front of people. It just doesn't work. It's one of the reasons why you go out into the field, into somewhere where there's no people, and then you do it there. And again, the point is that the words of my prayer, they're different than the words of Torah. Because the words of Torah, it's like Nishikin, it's like my mind, because it's a connection in the mind, it's like my mind and Hashem's mind, they unite, they become one. But nothing is born from, like in the human body, there's nothing born from here. But if you want to change reality, have an effect on reality, it has to be Dveikus, and that comes from prayer. Because the words that come out of prayer, they originate somewhere else. Where do they originate? In the heart.
So words of prayer are not in the mind.
They're not from the mind, they come from the heart. So these are two different levels of words, entirely different. One is intellectual and the other one is emotional. So an embrace is also emotional. It's also to bring the two hearts closer, but there's nothing passing from one to the other yet. It's just to feel each other. So a mitzvah, it brings us closer to Hashem, and there's a lot happening, but it doesn't yet give birth to something new. And the power of prayer is such that it does give birth to something new. Mitzvahs also, they're also considered to be higher in a certain sense, but there's nothing like the prayer. Sorry?
Prayer does or doesn't give birth to something.
Prayer does.
Yes, right.
We said that in this world, what's demanded from us is mostly action. That we can't be passive in this world. And yet, we just said that in the time of exile, what's needed, or what develops the strongest, is the faith, which is inaction. It's not to be active. So what happens when you're inactive? So you create Torah. It's not to say that Torah is not something you should do anyway, but it's saying that when there was an inability to act, So there was a lot more Torah created. And so the time that Torah really proliferated was from the time that the exile started, the last 2,000 years, from the destruction of the temple. Before that, we don't have that much Torah. The Mishnah was created, the Gemara was created, the Midrashim were created. It's almost like that I don't have the ability now to engage the world. I don't have an ability to change something. So what do? I work on my own needs, like inside, without disengaging from the world. That's why so much Torah was created. It says that all this time they were waiting for Mashiach. And they learned from the pasuk in Chavakuk, Ya'aseh la mechakeh lo, that Hashem will do for he who waits for him. And the Zohar says, mechakeh is otiyot chokhmah. It's the letters of chokhmah. In the meantime, when there's nothing, you see that there's nothing you can do. So what should you do? You should learn Torah. So faith is associated with learning Torah. Whatever mitzvahs you can do. But why did Chassidus put such a huge stress on davening? The people daven many hours. Because it's an attempt to change reality, to re-engage reality, and to change the malchus, change the kingdom, change the way things are down here. And to do that, you have to spend a lot of time in dveikus. What does it mean, the dveikus? It's suddenly a person feels overwhelmed with passion for Hashem. So so stand up and daven. Don't wait. A lot of times it says that a person who's learning Torah is putter from prayer. Like Rashbi or Rabbi Yehuda, who daven once every 30 days. Because they were they didn't have to pursue this. But they were owned the time of after the destruction of the temple. How does Choni HaMe'agel change reality? How does he bring down rain? He puts himself in a circle and says, I'm the line in the circle. I'm the confidence within reality. And I will pray until the rain comes. There's a whole story about what happened before that has to do with his preparing the line. It's not for now, but that his whole understanding was that I can change reality, but that was in the time of the temple. And when you're not in the time of the temple, so there's a lot more feeling of that I have to focus on faith and not on confidence so much. But the return to the land of Israel is the movement back into the time of the temple. So it's not yet, there's no temple yet. And one might say that we're somewhat far from it. But the state of mind is already shifted enough that people feel that there's certain things that we can do. But still, the smart person understands that as long as there's no temple, you still have to be very careful about when you decide to do something, whether it's really possible to do something or not, because you're not the owner of reality. You don't own reality. Hashem hasn't given the all clear to go and do whatever you want. And so if you feel like you need to do something, so first of all, go to the base midrash. That's what it says. That first of all, before you decide that you want to do something, this is from the Ishbitzer, from Me'ah Shilach. Me'ah Shilach was very big on the idea that everything that everybody does, every Jew ever did, is a mitzvah. Nobody really ever sinned. And because of that, he was also very sensitive to when do you actually act. You shouldn't always act. You shouldn't be impetuous. So he goes through 4 stages of figuring out whether what's coming from you here is really for the sake of, for holiness, or it's just to feel yourself. To feel that you're important, to feel that you can do, to feel your existence, to feel your yesh. The
And what's the
bina,
other choice that it needs to be done? What was the other choice?
whether this is really something that Hashem is sanctioning and is coming from holiness, or whether this is coming from your yeshut, from your sense of being. Every person does things because it validates us.
Most of the things we do.
Sorry?
It's most of what we do.
Hopefully there's many things. I mean, the fact that you have to prepare food for at home, or do the dishes, I don't, maybe for me it gives me validation because I don't feel I have to. So when I do it, so then I want sachar. And when you want validation, basically what you're saying is I want to be recognized.
But there's supposed
Right.
to be a time coming where we're gonna feel like Hashem is telling us time to move.
Good, he says green light. But now it's still up in the air, it's not clear. Should you do, should you not do? So by Ishbit he has a whole thing that it's very important for the person to figure out for themselves whether or not to act. Because not every action is needed. So for instance, if I would take and develop this idea, I did dishes last night at 2 a.m. Nobody woke up, Baruch Hashem. But, so why did I do it at 2 a.m? So if I'm honest with myself, I did it so that my wife, when she woke up in the morning, she would say, "Oh, thank you so much." What can I do? That's my Yetzer Hara. What can I do? So Baruch Hashem, that's my Yetzer Hara, not something else, but it's Yetzer Hara. Because in the end, it's seeking validation.
What's the word in Hebrew for validation?
I can't think of it right now. I'm seeking a shikoyach. I'm seeking somebody else's gratitude from my actions. Sipuk. Sipuk is the word we usually use, and sipuk is safek. It comes from Amalek.
But if you would have done it just to give her a break, that wouldn't be
Oh,
that would be
that's
he
something
would've
else.
done it at
But
5.
then I don't care if she ever sees that I did it or not, or that she might think one of the children did it, whatever. But here it's very important for me that when she wakes up in the morning,
It's
she comes.
different in a marriage. I mean,
So you
look
could
at
be doing
in
both.
another relationship of like in a husband and wife relationship, you want your wife to know that you did the dishes, that your child did not do, but that you did.
Why?
In that case, because you want her to appreciate that you helped her. And I think it's different in another relationship. No,
You
that's
could
what-
say
that's
Shalom
how I
Bayis.
feel about it.
You could say it's for Shalom Bayis.
You shouldn't be
Fair.
keeping points.
Right?
That's
It could
validation.
be a little of both. It could
That's
be both validation and
That's
also.
still, as long as it goes. If I really want her to have an easier time, so it doesn't matter if that's my goal, my real goal. That's what real Shalom Bayis comes from. I really care about you. It's not about
Yeah,
whether.
but no, it's also knowing
She-
that her husband cares.
You know what? She
That's
took.
not just any kid. It's
My
that
wife
you
took me
did it.
through a whole series with this. She showed me many times that when I do something, it's for the validation. I care a little about how she feels, but I more care about the fact. So where does it come from? It comes from insecurity. In the end, it comes from insecurity. So what, she says, what are you insecure about? You're insecure about a relationship? What are you insecure about? You have nothing to be insecure about.
It's triggers from before.
So then I said, maybe I'm a little bit insecure, but I'm also a junkie. Like we talked about this many times when we talked about rectifying the ego. My ego is still my ego.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that I want to do things in order to get the recognition, the validation.
Don't you do it because, oh, she's so tired? Like, that's
That plays a certain role, but again, if that was all that mattered, I would leave it at that. I wouldn't be against her knowing, but I wouldn't like.
You do it for her when you say, oh, she's tired, or oh, what a day.
Yeah,
That,
right. And I wouldn't care if she would know who did it or
Right.
not.
Yeah, but but on a higher level, a
I'm
woman
not-
needs to know a man gives to her. So
She
on
knows.
a higher level,
She knows. No, she knows.
you-
She's not
Even
insecure.
if she didn't know, she wouldn't
doesn't
know.
either.
She wouldn't have the connection with you, so you could go.
But she's not insecure.
I don't think she's insecure.
She knows everything's fine.
that's the nature of woman. Wow.
So, so she told me many times, if you're gonna do it, just do it. But don't feel that you should get recognition for it. That's rectifying the ego. That's exactly what we learned.
That's
Used
what
to
you
do
should
it?
tell you.
What?
That's
Sorry?
exactly what she should tell you.
Okay, she did the job.
Excellent.
So I said she took me through a whole educational series with this. So last night when I did it at 2:00, I thought about why am I doing it. So the truth was I was doing it because I was just I couldn't get to sleep and I didn't know what to do. So that's what I did.
Another 100.
But to get back to the point, so the Ishbitzer says that whenever you go to do something, to figure out whether you're doing it for the sake of Hashem or for your own sake, for the validation that comes from it, you have to go through 4 stages. And these 4 stages, I think we once discussed this in Doras and Nefesh in one class. So these 4 stages, they clarify to you what the underlying reason is.
Are you going to give them to us?
So I'll say that in short, but the main point was that they come from Bina. That everything that you do, in this sense, your willingness to act, what does Bina do? It gives birth to Vav and Hey. It gives birth to the 2 lower letters, to the whole lower unification. The whole lower unification comes from Bina. And Bina is the beginning of Yesh. It's the beginning of having a sense of being separate from, of having an impact on the world.
That's different. Yesh can be for bad, and having an impact is good.
It's any impact, and you can use it any way you want. You can use the impact to validate yourself, to seek recognition, and you can use the impact to actually change reality. And so because he was so much, I'm just giving an example of Dveikus in Chassidus, that he was so much into Dveikus, into this whole thing of we have license from Hashem to change things, that he developed this whole meditation or clarification in 4 stages of testing yourself, to check yourself, to see why you want to do something.
This is the Meshulov.
Meshulov. And he writes this in the parsha that he passed away in Vayigash. So there he brings it about Yaakov. He says, what's the first thing that you have to do? The first thing you have to do is you have to say to yourself, this is not going to be permanent. This is not eternal. Whatever act I do is not eternal. If I get any gratitude from it, it's not going to be eternal. It's going to pass in a moment. If I get any enjoyment from it, it's going to be for a moment. So is it worth it for me to stop what I'm doing? What am I doing instead? I'm learning. Is it worth it for me to stop learning and to go do this act, to go from Yud-K to Vav-K, from faith to confidence? Because whatever I do is not going to be permanent. But then he says something more than that. He says that
Is this number 2 or still 1?
the second one is already, he says, whatever you wanted to do, I can give you the eternal version of it from your learning. But it won't impact reality, but it'll still be the eternal version. Meaning you'll get the same feeling of validation, but you'll get it from Torah, except that it won't be in practice. It won't be something actual. I can show it to you in Torah. Believe me, that whatever you wanted to do, so for instance, there's a tremendous story in Chabad that the Rebbe Rashab once passed by his son's crib. He was a little baby. And he wanted to kiss him. He was asleep and he wanted to kiss him, and he didn't kiss him. And then, years later,
He wrote a mimer.
he went back to his room, meaning he wanted to kiss him, and he stopped himself, and everybody said, what? What kind of parent are you? He went back to his room, and he wrote a mimer. He wrote a whole Hasidic essay on a very deep topic. And then when his son was old enough, he gave it to him. And he said, this is a Hasidic kiss. What was he doing? That's exactly the kissing, that's the eternal aspect of the Yud-K. That it's an eternal unification. That's what the Meshulach means when he says, you have an eternal version of it in Torah itself. The kiss is one time. It won't stay forever. Even if I kiss my child, it's not something that will last forever. But if I give him this essay, which took him many hours to write, and he put his whole soul into this essay, so that is infinitely more powerful than the kiss. That's a beautiful example of what it means that faith is eternal. It doesn't change. It never shifts. Never moves. And by the way, one of the biggest problems that we have today is that people can't write to each other. They don't write to each other. That idea, I mean, this every parent has to master. That you have to write to your children from time to time. It's not enough to just speak. To speak is like prayer. It's good to speak. It's very good. It's a type of unification, but it's not a permanent unification. It may change something at that moment, but it's not something that will last forever. So in the parent-child relationship, the parents have to also, they're the Yud-Kei. They have to learn how to give Torah. They have to learn how to give something in writing, not just in speech. The speech also connects. It's very important. That's to pray between people is to have a conversation. It's like the same way that you have a conversation with Hashem. So when a parent takes time away and talks to a child or a staff, even if it's not children, just somebody that's close to you and younger or whatever and looks up to you. So to take the time to speak, that's like prayer. And it has an impact, it has a very real impact. But you also have to learn how to even not kiss physically. Just to kiss in the sense of writing something. And that writing will be more eternal than something that you say. So some people will say, maybe if you record it, it's the same thing as writing. Maybe. It's a little bit like it, but it's not the same thing. And the big plus is that there's when you write, meaning in faith, right? In faith, there's a feeling that there's far less, there's a lot more bittul there. There's a lot less feeling of yesh there. There's a lot less feeling.
Did you get to 3 yet?
I'm not going to do the next two.
Oh.
So it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we'll end here.
I
Thank
do have
you.
a question though.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
couldn't get him to keep it another hour.
You can turn it off, you know.
Okay.